Violet Vale, Afghan. About the pattern. Violet Vale is a place mentioned in Anne of Green Gables by author L.M. Montgomery. Beyond Willowmere came Violet Vale, a little green dimple in the shadow of Mr. Andrew Bell's big woods. Of course there are no violets there now, Anne told Marilla, but Diana says there are millions of them in spring. Oh, Marilla, can't you just imagine you see them? It actually takes away my breath. I named it Violet Vale. Diana says she never saw the beat of me for hitting on fancy names for places. It's nice to be clever at something, isn't it? Anne Shirley.
Hi, this is Lisa with Holland Designs Crochet. I'm just making a short video demonstration of one of my designs called the Violet Vale Afghan. So Violet Vale, if you're familiar, is a name of a place in Anne of Green Gables. So Violet Vale is quite a pretty name, and that's was the name for this blanket. It was worked in several shades of purple. And so I've already worked row 1, which was just foundation row loops, and you need to have an odd number of those. So I started with 5 for this little demo swatch. Row 2, we work a V-stitch in the first loop, a 4 cluster shell in the next loop, a V-stitch in the next loop, and again a 4 cluster shell will go into this next one. So I'll just demonstrate how that's worked. All these stitches are defined in the pattern, so this is the cluster stitch that I'm using, and there's a chain 1 in between each of those cluster stitches. And so for a 4 cluster shell, you have 4 cluster stitches and a chain 1 between each of those. So I'll just finish the shell here and show you what it looks like. Okay, so you can see 4 cluster stitches with a chain 1 in between each of those, so you have 3 chains. And then we finish the row with a V-stitch in the last foundation loop, and the V-stitch is just double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. So that's what row 2 looks like. And at the end of row 2, we do a chain 1 turn, and we begin row 3 with a single crochet in the chain 1 space of the first V-stitch. And then we work cluster stitches and chains. We work 5 of them across this 4 cluster shell, and this is how we do that. We work a cluster stitch in the first chain 1 space, and we work chain 1, and then we work what is called a 3 cluster shell in the next chain 1 space, which is the center of that 4 cluster shell that we worked on row 2. And then we do a chain 1 after that, and then we work our last cluster stitch in the next chain 1 space. So you can see how that's widened and fanned out that area there from the 4 cluster shell to now where you have 5 clusters with the 3 cluster shell in the center and 1 at each side. And then you just do a single crochet in the chain 1 space of the next V-stitch. So that is the pattern repetition for row 3. So I'll just do that one more time, finish this row for you. The sample was done with a sport weight yarn and an H hook, and for this little swatch here, I'm just using a DK weight yarn. So you can really use yarn and hook of choice for this type of a blanket, make it to any dimensions. I do write my patterns in a way that you can customize them. So it actually also make a really pretty scarf pattern. And if you wanted the shells to match up on both ends of the scarf, what you would do is simply work your scarf halfway, like half the length, and then you would come back and begin again on the opposite side of the foundation row and work the exact same thing the other way. So you'd end up with the nice shells going the same direction if you wore the scarf. So it'd be really pretty. And so let's see, then we just finish again with a single crochet in the last chain 1 space of the last V-stitch. So that's the completion of row 3. Okay, as we begin row 4, we are doing a chain 3 turn at the end of row 3, and then we are told to work a double crochet in the single crochet at the base of this beginning chain 3 there. So we work our double crochet there. And what's that has created for us is basically a V-stitch, so that you can see it's just the same thing we had on the first row. So now on on the second row, on row 4, we have again like a V-stitch that we've created. Okay, so then I'm looking at my pattern here. The next thing we're told to do after we've done that double crochet is we're told to chain 1. We skip the next chain 1 space, and we single crochet in the next chain 1 space. Then we work a chain 3, a single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the next chain 1 space, and then we work a V-stitch in the next single crochet. So what we're doing here is basically recreating our foundation row, because we've got, basically we're creating space, V-stitches and loops that we can work into. So let me just continue across this row. So we repeat what's in the parentheses in the pattern. So from here we go chain 1, skip the next chain 1 space, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 3, single crochet in the next chain 1 space, chain 1, skip this chain 1 space, and then V-stitch in the next single crochet, which in this case here is at the end of the row. And so just remember that anytime you see a pattern and it has parentheses, that's what's being repeated. It's being marked off for you there, that's the repetition. So you can see how we've worked that. That's completion of row 4, and that's setting up the foundation for row 5. At the end of row 4, we are told to do a chain 3 and turn. And then we start row 5. We are doing a double crochet in the chain 1 space of the first V-stitch. So again, that's creating what looks like a V-stitch. And then we're working a 4 cluster shell again in the next chain 3 space. Okay, so again, this is very much what we did previously. And then we do a V-stitch in the chain 1 space of the next V-stitch. And then it just says to repeat across between what is in the parentheses. So that's going to be a 4 cluster shell. Mm-hmm. And then we end the row with our final V-stitch in the last chain 1 space of the last V-stitch there at the end of the row. Okay, and then that is the completion of row 5. So you can see how that lines up beautifully. And then the repetition then has you doing rows 6 through 8, which are repetition of rows 3 through 5. So everything I've just demonstrated, rows 3 through 5, that's basically the pattern repetition. And so the next thing I would do would go back to row 3, and I would be doing a single crochet in the chain 1 space of the first V-stitch, cluster in this chain 1 space here, chain 1, 3 cluster shell, so it does get to be quite repetitive, and it shouldn't be too hard to memorize after a while. And you can see how you're building basically sets of 4 cluster shells, which are then topped with the 3 cluster shell with the additional clusters at the sides, so it fans out and creates a really pretty fanned shell effect there. And then again on row 3, single crochet than has worked in the chain one space. So I was just referring to my pattern again. So yeah, just have the pattern open and looking at it or print it off, and you can just double check what you're doing as you're working across the row. You can see how pretty that is. And again, it would make a lovely scarf or a blanket of any dimensions. So hopefully that has helped you follow the pattern, the written pattern, and hopefully you'll enjoy working this one.